Hello all. I'm taking over the agenda setting theory, which explains how the media influences people's perceptions. This theory became more prominent by McCombs and Shaw, who created this theory in the 1970s, and that is according to our handy-dandy Green Book, a first look at communication theory, a book published in 2015 by M. Griffin and Glenn Sparks. The justification for studying this particular theory was because I was always fascinated by how the media influenced our lives. I will go into more detail about that later, but for the time being, I flipped through the book and it was the first chapter when I first got the book that I wanted to dive into right away. There were plenty of misconceptions I had and preconceived notions about this, and I will go into that further and more in depth. I think using the standard KWL chart that we've used at younger ages possibly, the what I know, what I want to learn, and what I have learned, would be a great way to explain this journey into all of these important factors. Along with these ideas I had before, and the ones that I wanted to know more about, and the conclusions made, I will take you through the research aspect. So I feel like the most important part of research is to establish what you already know and what you want to know. The first thing I knew was that until recent times, sources of media were very limited. I also knew that the media had a huge influence on everything related to what we knew. And it almost seemed as if they controlled everything. Max McCombs, the one who founded this theory, along with Shaw, had me more comfortable knowing that there is a more objective way in approaching this instead of being too interpretive about it. I think his influence in this theory is huge because of his background in journalism. He is a professor at the University of Texas at Austin in the School of Journalism. Him and Shaw actually coined the term agenda setting in 1968, and ever since then there has been more than 400 studies of agenda setting that have been conducted worldwide. Another aspect of this theory that I knew was that it was an objective theory, and everyone that knows me in this class knows how much I love objective theories. This is mainly because it is more research-based and the theories could be explained. Another aspect of this theory that I knew was that it was a socio-psychological, traditional theory. Most of everything that is my favorite. So the social aspect is that it involves family, religion, wealth, society, and the psychological aspect is that it involves feelings, thoughts, actions, and beliefs. And together, this makes a socio-psychological theory. Another aspect that I wanted to know was if this theory had anything to do with yellow journalism. I wanted to know if it had anything to do with fear culture, because that seems like something that takes over a lot of our local news stories. Overall, I had a desire to know what exactly agenda setting was. I also wanted to know a term I've seen often reading about this. The term is salience. I also wanted to know about the term framing and the term index of curiosity. The research aspect included looking into the online RCC library, Google Scholar, and looking into what was researched in the book. Most of the research I go in depth with in my paper are events that are now not as recent and interesting. For example, I reference in my paper, and I will reference now, the former President Nixon, Vice President Agnew. Before I get into that in depth, I'm going to cite this source as being originally from Agnew Spiro, Theodore, quote, television news coverage, end quote, published in Vital Speeches of the Day, November 13th, 1969, Des Moines, Iowa, at the Midwestern Regional Republican Conference. Spiro Agnew was a vice president of the United States during Nixon's term. He is noted to be one of the most famous political figures to make a statement about this agenda-setting role in the media. He mentions examples of agenda setting and framing done by the liberal media that are extremely relevant to this theory. In June of 1994, O.J. Simpson appeared on the cover of Newsweek and Time. Newsweek had shown him in a different light, and Time had shown him in a different light completely, literally, because he was shown to be darker, which suggested from critics to mean that he was more menacing. This was done before his trial, and a lot of people suggest that this is an example of agenda setting. Another source I used was McComb's agenda setting journal, referencing the 5 stages of agenda setting. The citation is McCombs, Maxwell, quote, a look at agenda setting, past, present, and future, end quote, Journalism Studies, Volume 6, Number 4, 2005, pages 543 through 557. McCombs provides insight on the 5 stages of agenda setting, and he sources principal ideas and central base empirical findings in the journal, which was previously scattered and hard to access. Overall, he references the 5 stages of agenda setting theory and alludes to the evolution of the agenda setting as a foundational prequel for further understanding. In conclusion, I learned that the liberal and conservative side alike both criticize the media's foundation. I also learned that they do have the power to reinforce ideas into our head by controlling what goes on the front page and what ultimately stays behind.